I'm Tenitra Batiste, and I gotta say, it might be a hot seat up in New England.
I'm Aaron Freeman, and I just really need this to be the week where the Falcons offense gets off to a good start.
I'm Jarvis Davis, and the Falcons have to figure it out on offense. I don't care who's at quarterback.
ATL! ATL!
Rise up, A-Town. It's the Falcons Squad. Everything Atlanta Falcons every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the ATL. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Straight from the ATL, the Falcons Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to the Falcons Squad Show, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Locked On Falcons host Aaron Freeman, Locked On analyst Jarvis Davis, and 11 Alive anchor Maria Martin to join us shortly. The Squad Show is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So, can they maybe stop May? We'll discuss. And too much heat on the O-line, too much heat on Raw, or not enough heat on either one of them, we will discuss. And who will be the X factor and needs to give an impact this week, maybe better than we've seen him do this entire season. We'll download on that. But first, how in the world are the Falcons going to get to the point of the edict that one Jarvis Davis has given them since before the start of the season? Jarvis, the Falcons offense has managed a paltry 10 points a game this season on average. The result, most recently, you got back-to-back losses. So how does Zac Robinson get his offense to bounce back on the road against the New England Patriots, a team that not only averages nearly 27 points a game, but they only allow 18 points from the defensive side?
Yeah, this is going to be a tough one. And I think that Jeff Ulrich put it best when he said the most toughest team is going to win. It's like, well, okay, here we go. We're going to find out who's the toughest team. And I think I know the answer to that question, at this point, because like you mentioned, they've only scored 10 points each in the last two games. So that's not good enough. That's nowhere near good enough. I'm talking about if you on the road, at home, in a little park ball down the street, and 7-under team, that just does it. You're not going to win football games with that type of production on the offensive side of the football. And I think that, of course, yes, the run game, they have to get that going. They have to figure it out. They can't turn the ball over when they do get some type of momentum going or get moving the football up and down the field. And I think that when you look at where this team is currently, and you know that teams are going to key in on the run, you got to have a counter.
Yes.
You got to have a counter at this point. There's no way that we're going to be surprised if the Patriots stop the run. Well, they haven't given up 50 yards rushing to a running back all year. So, yeah, I better have that in my game plan that, if we're unable to block this bad boy up with Bijan, we got to figure out a way to get him to rock and start moving the football so they can lighten up a little bit. I thought Michael Penix put it best. He said, we got to figure out a way to get the ball over the top.
Yeah.
They got to be able to get the ball over the top. That's the only way people are going to back up and say, all right.
Yeah.
If Darnell Mooney is back healthy, Zac Robinson says he's healthy. If he's where we think he should be, that should be a sign that, hey, they should be able to connect on that deep ball, because that's the only way these guys going to lighten that box up. That's the only way. And if they aren't, we're going to be looking at another loss with talking about 10 points in the game and, we couldn't figure it out once they stopped the run. You shouldn't be surprised by that because of what New England has put on tape.
Yeah, and you're right. You shouldn't be surprised about New England loading the box if that's all you've given them on film the last couple of weeks. They're going to do just that because they've seen that be effective. So it's on you. The onus is on you as a Falcons offense to say, hey, we really do have more bullets in the holster. We can do more than that. We're more than one-dimensional. Well, now you got to prove it, because Aaron, also, you look at the point totals and they are what they are. Taking away that game against the Washington Commanders where the Falcons scored 34, and even, okay, we'll give them a slight edge in the 24 points they scored against the Bills. But other than that, you're looking at paltry showings like 10 points the last 2 weeks, right? And getting no points on the board, getting goose egged against the Panthers. And it's hard not to think about those 3 games as the examples of who they are versus the examples of what they did in those last games. But for you, what is it that they need to do? I mean, how is it that they're going to, specifically Zac Robinson, get deeper into his bag, bounce back against these Patriots? Because we know that not only can they score at will, but they can hold opponents from scoring.
Yeah, well, you mentioned sort of what this team typically has been on the road, which has been the struggle bus offensively.
Yeah.
And I think, this week represents a good opportunity for them to get off to a better start offensively than what we have typically seen from this team on the road going up against this Patriots team, which is a very good defense. But they typically don't look that way in the first quarter of games. They're giving up a bunch of points. They've consistently given up points on the opening drives in like 6 out of their 8 games this season. And so usually the Patriots is like, oh, okay. And I was talking to Locked On Patriots yesterday about this, where it's like the opening game script is very effective against this Patriots. And then once they make the adjustments, they sort of lock down on defense. And that's kind of the case with Zac Robinson and this Falcons offense, at least this year, where that opening game script is strong and this team is doing some of their best work early in games. But then as the game wears on and those adjustments need to be made and those counter punches that Jarvis is talking about need to be had, that's where the Falcons have not been as strong. They're 3-1, I believe, in games where they've scored on their opening drive this year, the Falcons, that is, and 0-3 in games where they didn't get off to that fast start. And so this team is basically a front runner. T, you mentioned it. You're talking about how one-dimensional this offense is. Well, they haven't even really been that good at that one dimension. We talked about this on Monday with the whole, Raheem Morris using the name of the city as a verb to talk about, being a physical football team. And it's like, I get it. I understand why Raheem Morris wants to claim that identity, but this team hasn't really earned it. They've done it in a couple of games. Certainly the Minnesota game comes to mind. The Buffalo game comes to mind. But for the most part this season, they haven't really been that good of a running football team. They've been fine at it. And a lot of, Bijan's production and his success has not really been as just like, oh, just give him the ball 20 times and let him go to work. It's been a lot more in terms of how dynamic he is in the passing game. And so that's going to be, I think, the challenge for the Falcons, especially against this Patriots defense that's really good at stopping the run. And going back to what Jarvis said with the counter punches, okay, like Bijan's going to have to kind of be the guy this week because you're dealing with some injuries that pretty much every other player in your skill group is a little nicked up. And so he's the one guy that is healthy. He's your best player. You got to find ways to get him the football, not only in the ground game, but also through the air and still make him the weapon that, New England's going to key on to be like, we got to take this guy out of the lineup. And if you're the Falcons, you can't let that happen, because if they're successfully able to force you to play left-handed, based off of what we have seen so far this season, based off of the current status of the injury report, I think it's going to be a real challenge for this team to come up with those counter punches. If New England basically says, we're going to force, Darnell Mooney to beat us, we're going to force Kyle Pitts to beat us. I don't know if those guys have done enough at this point in the season to feel really confident that the Falcons can play that way. So they're going to have to find a way to get Bijan going. And if that's not on the ground, that's going to have to be through the air.
And I think too, Maria, just piggybacking on Aaron's last point about how you create the variety, what makes Bijan so special, what keeps him in the conversation with Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey for starters, is the fact that he is versatile. The fact that he can not just catch the ball out of the backfield, but he can even get you yards after the catch. He can get to the second, third levels, and ultimately the end zone, if you will. And you can't say, oh, wow, he fumbled the ball. Someone who never fumbles the ball, and all of a sudden we end the game with just 9 carries, or we don't see that ball getting into his hands as a receiver. So for you, Maria, when you look at, and I'm, sometimes I'm getting 2 things coming in at one time. So I've got Maria, I've got Marcia. But when you look at that, the way that even if Bijan Robinson was used, or kind of how Zac Robinson schemed this game last week, how do you see them bouncing back and really being able to put points on the board against a Patriots team that we know can score?
Well, and we also know that the Patriots defense is very good at taking the runaway. And so that's going to be a very good challenge for the Falcons to try to bounce back this week. Zac Robinson said it a couple of times yesterday that he feels like there's a big sense of urgency. He kept saying, we've got to get it corrected. And he's right. I mean, Aaron and Jarvis did a really good job of illustrating some of the issues that the Falcons have had on offense. And if there's any team to really capitalize on the struggles that the Falcons are having offensively right now, it's this Patriots defense. They are having an unbelievable historical run on the defensive side of the football. And what's crazy is, yes, I know we're going to get into the offensive line. There has been some inconsistencies on this offensive line for the Falcons, which does also affect the way that Bijan is used and some other people as well. And so when you cannot be gap sound, which Jake Matthews talked yesterday about, being gap sound is going to be one of the most critical things for them up front against this Patriots defense. That's where it all starts for me. If you start with the gap sound mentality, it will open up a couple of different things. Yes, Bijan the last 2 games has been able to be taken out of the game by other opposing defenses. He's going to have to be effective in this game on Sunday if they want a chance on offense. And they do have to get away from some of the predictability that we have talked about, every single week to this point. So that's one of the biggest things for the Falcons. They're predictable. The offensive line has had a couple of different issues. And it's interesting because we don't talk enough about the struggles in the quarterback play as well. We knew that Michael Penix Jr. was going to have some bumps in the road, if you will, because he's a young quarterback. We've illustrated that on this podcast. He doesn't play against the Dolphins. Kirk Cousins comes in. Well, it doesn't really matter at this point who's playing quarterback for the Falcons. The offense is continuing to struggle. They're continuing against man coverage on defense. So they need to change a lot. So there's not one thing to pinpoint, Tenitra, because across the board, you look at every single level of this offense and there are corrections that need to be made. Sounds a bit concerning, sounds a bit doom and gloom, but this is an offense that can obviously do that because of all the pieces and weapons that they have. It means Drake London being the Drake London that we anticipated heading into this year, which we have not seen yet. Obviously, he didn't play against the Dolphins. He practiced or was limited at practice, and anticipating him to play. But I think it's not one person. I think it's every single level of this offense. And it starts with the quarterback too, as well.
Yeah. And I think, Maria, you make some great points there. And, when, like you said, there's enough blame to go around for what we've seen the last couple of weeks. You can blame it on everything from, I guess, the lowest hanging fruit, which would be injury, all the way to maybe the highest hanging fruit, which would be your offensive coordinator. And I'm not quite sure what one of our faithful followers and listeners is saying here, but D Creative Vision, I got to throw it out to you guys because he said, well, can we keep in mind that Zac is a second-year play caller? It sounds like he's saying, hey, if I'm reading him correctly, guys, and you respond, hey, let's give him a break. He's a second-year play caller. Not our problem.
You're a professional. I mean,
You're a professional.
you prepare.
Time to shine.
Yeah.
You came from an amazing tree.
Yeah.
That's why you were brought here. You came from a young mind like Sean McVay, who literally has been a part of revolutionizing the game on the offensive side of the ball. And, I was talking about this yesterday. This is something, again, I know we got to wrap, but this is something that's come up a couple times. And it's like, okay, last year, Raheem comes in as the head coach with 2 new green coordinators, right? You can take Jimmy Lake and what happened with him in the first half of the season, because you knew that you had a strong defensive mind, a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator as your head coach. So once you dismiss Jimmy Lake, you're good on the other side of the ball. Do we not remember the nice uptick we saw on the defensive side? Because Ra could plug in all of the holes and kind of fix things. You don't have that luxury on the offensive side of the ball necessarily, because that's not necessarily Ra's cup of tea, right? So now you're still dealing with an offensive coordinator who's in his second season with a very young offense. So unfortunately, it is what it is. And I am not suggesting that you go away from him, because the question is always going to be, well, who do you get in his place? Unless there's some offensive consultant out there who has a pre-existing relationship that you can kind of plug and play, if you will. But other than that, we have him and he is what he is. But I'm sorry, you can't make the excuse of, well, he's a second-year coordinator. Yeah, well, this is a Falcons team, a franchise, and a fan base that has been waiting to get back to the postseason, and there just isn't time for any excuses. All you can do at this point is reset yourself and get on your game and dig into the playbook with a bunch of amazing first-round picks that you have on offense and get it cracking.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't want to be in a situation where you're questioning the hiring practices of the head coach, because we question a lot of hiring practices of assistants from Dan Quinn before he got fired. So you don't want to put yourself in this situation at the midpoint you're in your second year as a head coach. So I think that's why he has to figure out. I mean, Zac Robinson and Raheem Morris better have every resource that he can possibly use to help him get it right, because it's too early to be questioning hiring assistants, because James Lake was one. That was one. Like, you can't be both of those guys within 2 years. Like, you can't say, oh, I fired both of my coordinators in 2 years. Well, you hired the wrong people within 2 years. And it probably means you probably was the wrong hire in the first place. You don't want to have that right now.
Yeah. I'll just say, when the main reason you got to think about, why did the Falcons choose Raheem Morris? Because they thought that they were ready to win right now, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was why they fired Arthur Smith. They looked at the roster and they said, hey, our play calling, our offense is not producing to the level that it needs to. So you need to hit the ground running. So if you want to give Zac Robinson a pass for year one, that's fair, But
yes.
Now at a certain point, like, you have to deliver the results. That's the mandate. And in a different circumstance where the Falcons drafted Michael Penix, no Kirk Cousins, we're a young team, this is a long-term build, you could be a little bit more patient and let Zac Robinson grow and develop as a play caller. But the mandate from ownership, from top down, was like, we need to win right now. And if you're not able to deliver on that mandate, you're not going to be here long term, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I'll just say something really quick. Yesterday, Jake Matthews in the locker room said winning solves everything. And he's right. I mean, the minute you start winning football games, all this conversation about the predictability in the offensive play calling, did Raheem Morris hire the right people? Is there a question of whether we should relinquish play calling duties? All that vanishes. You win football games and all that goes away. And just to kind of reiterate what everyone is saying, you look at this offensive roster, and on paper, it is set up to be successful right now. Right now. It is what we've been saying all offseason. You finally get your quarterback that everybody believes in. You have all these first-round draft picks. You have all these pieces on offense that can be explosive, yet the explosiveness hasn't happened. This is a team that has scored 2 touchdowns in 2 games, and they have not looked right since that second quarter of the Bills game. So when that is happening, especially whenever Tampa is doing what they're doing and there is the pressure in the division and the gap gets larger, the conversation gets larger as well. You have to win football games. You have to find the end zone. It's simply that simple.
It's that simple. Now, the Falcons defense contained the MVP. Can they find a way to do it against the offensive rookie of the year front runner? We'll take that under further review. This episode of our Falcon Squad show is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And if you've been using Prize Picks during both football Sundays and NBA tip-offs, you know how exciting it can make the game. And if you like picking your favorite players, whether that's Patrick Mahomes, Stephen Curry, you can see how those predictions play out real time. And the new Stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph's points, threes, and even assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, like unfortunately we saw with Trae Young in the Hawks game last night, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL. And you know what that gets you? $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. So Prize Picks, it's good to be right. All right, guys, before we switch over to the defensive side of the ball, there was one more question I wanted to ask you guys. Aaron, I'll start with you. Just looking at Darnell Mooney, and that kind of piggybacks on what Maria was talking about as well in terms of explosive plays and having the guys that can get that to happen, which we know if you can get more explosives, that probably means you're getting more yards and you're making those yards count. Well, Darnell Mooney, we haven't quite seen that out of him. We were hoping that he was going to establish himself last week against the Dolphins, but only one catch for 11 yards. Is this the week when he gets going? And if so, how do you see that happening?
We'll see. I mean, we've been saying, oh, this is the week. This is the, he's healthy. It's been a month, he's come back and it's still not anything. And I think that's a very underrated element of why this offense has struggled, because so much of their success last year, particularly when it came to explosive plays, was, Kirk just say, hey, Darnell's open down there somewhere. And you just don't have that element. And basically, outside of the games where Bijan goes off or Drake London goes off or Kyle Pitts has a day, this offense is not really doing the things that it was doing a year ago. And basically, until they can get Darnell Mooney going and getting that 1-2 punch in their passing game consistently, I think it's still going to be a very herky-jerky struggle bus type performance.
Jerky.
So,
like the verbiage.
I think
his verbs are verbing.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Unlike Raheem's. But I think this is, whether Mooney's going to get going this week, it's like hard to say, because it's like he should have been getting going at some point in the last couple of weeks and it hasn't happened. Eventually it's going to happen, but is it going to be too little too late at that point?
Yeah. Maria?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's something going on with these wide receivers. They do not look right. And whether it is injury, which, that's the low-hanging fruit, as we talked about earlier on the podcast, which, Drake has been banged up, Darnell has been banged up. So I don't know if these are lingering issues, but something ain't right with those guys, because we know what they can look like and what they bring to the table, similar to what Aaron is talking about when they're hitting on all cylinders. We saw it at multiple occasions with Kirk Cousins last year. And even with Penix later in the year, you saw glimpses of what they could do with these pass catchers. They're pretty much non-existent when you compare it to some of those games that were very explosive. So I don't know what it is. There's the reshuffling of personnel there. You get rid of Ike Hilliard, Ray McLeod exits. There is something very interesting happening in that wide receiver room. So until it is proven to me that a guy can go out there and make a difference and be explosive, I don't really know when that's going to happen. And again, this is an offense built off of run first. That's their bread and butter. Talking about the outside zone, and that's what they lean on, and all that stuff is good and well. But you still need to be able to hit those explosive plays if you want to get closer to the red zone and capitalize in that area as well.
Yeah, Jarvis?
Yeah, I think my whole thing is with all of this is like a lot of offensive coordinators' goals are to figure out when they're going to play man coverage, because more than likely they got wide receiver one to beat man coverage. And they didn't have wide receiver one last week. So that's why it looked ugly. You had Cardale Hodge being the first option for Kirk Cousins. Nobody wants to see that, and that's why I say hopefully Drake is back So he can draw some of that coverage, some of that, hey, we're gonna lock him up with our best corner, or we're going to double him in situations. And then that's when Darnell Mooney is at his best, when he's getting the second best guy in coverage. So, and we saw him take advantage of that a lot last year. So I think that going into the last week, I felt like Darnell was getting healthy. He was starting to look like himself. He had a couple of nice catches against San Francisco. So I'm like, okay, maybe they can build off that and figure out how to get him to rock. But it just did not work out because it was one particular play. I think it was like 3rd and 8. I can't remember exactly but it was definitely 3rd down, and the Dolphins were just locked up, man. Nothing fancy, and nobody was open. No, it was nowhere for Kirk to throw the football. I don't care how fast he went through his progressions. It was nowhere for him to throw the rock. So when you in that particular situation where most offensive coordinators want to be in, and there's nowhere to go to the football, that's how you know you're in trouble. So that's how you get the 10 points. It's 10 points in a game. So against a team like that, because your wide receiver one's not there, and you basically have a tight end who's been the most consistent guy in B-man coverage, you're not going to win football games like that. So, I think that if Drake is back, preferably, they'll be able to take advantage of those situations.
Jarvis, what did I say earlier? This offense particularly struggles against man coverage, and you've seen that play out in real time, no matter who is behind the offensive line, no matter who's in there at quarterback. And that's something that's got to get corrected. And New England doesn't play man a whole lot. I would be willing to bet this Sunday they're going to try to implement a bit more of that on defense.
Yeah, you're probably peeking in the playbook of Mike Vrabel for sure. And listen, Aaron, when we look at this, there have been shades. That's why this is so frustrating for us, because there have been shades of greatness that we have seen from this Falcons team overall, particularly their defense. We saw it against MVP Josh Allen. Like they definitely, especially in that first half, they had him in check. So now you're going up against a guy in Drake May who in last season steadily was climbing and starting to, towards the end of the season, make his case for offensive rookie of the year. This year, he's in the conversation right there with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen as an MVP candidate. So nothing easier in terms of who's going to be under center, but what can Jeff Ulbrich do to maybe have that kind of success on defense that he had against Allen against May this week?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think Jeff Ulbrich is right when there's a lot of shades of Josh Allen in Drake May in terms of the ways that he can challenge your defense are very similar to Josh Allen's ability to push the ball down the field, the athleticism to extend plays and create with his legs. I believe both May and Allen lead the NFL in terms of like scrambles against man coverage. We talked about how the tendency is against those high caliber quarterbacks is you want to play man coverage because you want to shrink the windows, because if you play zone coverage, they're just going to pick you apart. It's just going to be too easy against those guys. But then the challenge is when you play man, guys have their back to the defense and they can just kind of like, oh, everybody's not looking at me. I'm just going to take off and run for 15 yards. And against the Bills, the Falcons had Divine Deablo to try to keep that in check as a spy and were able to get an early lead. And that led
to Jarvis.
Yes.
To really get after the quarterback and pin their ears back and be like, we're playing with a lead. We're able to dial up our blitzes because we know the Bills have to throw the ball in order to play this game. And if the Falcons can't play that way offensively, right, and get off to the fast start that we were talking about earlier, that's going to be a challenge for this defense because it doesn't force the Patriots to be one-dimensional and throw the football, and that limits the Falcons' ability to kind of dial up their blitzes, which has so far been their superpower and a big reason why they were able to keep Josh Allen in check in that game. And then you don't really have a good option to spy the quarterback. And we talked about this the last couple of seasons when the Falcons have really struggled against mobile quarterbacks because they didn't have the level of athleticism that they needed at the linebacker position, in part due to Troy Anderson needing to be that guy and not being available. And now Divine Deablo, we're just going to move past it, being that guy, and now he's not available. And so there's the challenge where it's like we're right back to where we were. And so Jeff Ulbricht's gonna have to scheme some things up. Do they play with more dime defense? And you ask, I don't know, a safety to have to spy, what does that do if Jesse Bates is not healthy this week? So there's a lot more challenges dealing with Drake May than there were with Josh Allen. And that has little to do with the quarterback. It's just simply the state of the Falcons defense right now is going to be a lot harder for them to kind of repeat the success that they had against Josh Allen because of injuries and other various factors.
That part. What about for you, Maria, when you look at the tall order that it will be for this Jeff Ulbricht defense to contain May? How do they do it?
Jarvis is dying to talk about Troy Anderson, so
that's why I purposely went to you, Maria.
I'm still trying to figure out who that is.
We're gonna let me before. I just wanted to address Jarvis looking like he was dying to say something.
Yeah,
so I'm gonna talk now.
Who is that guy that you speak of? What was his number? Maybe I remember his number. Like, what is his number?
Anyways, the power of this show, I'm not going to say myself, but this show, a lot of people on the show, i.e. Jarvis, loves to give nicknames to people. Okay, right? Yeah. Jeff Ulbricht called Drake May a mini, quote unquote, a mini Josh Allen. He does present a lot of Josh Allen-like tendencies, as you guys had mentioned already. And yes, I think we should shed a tear for Divine Deablo. He was so unique in this defense and what he was being asked to do. And it's putting pressure on so many different guys. Jeff Ulbricht said, yes, against the Dolphins, it was kind of a Divine Deablo by committee, which you did see that on display. You're going to see the similar, if not the same thing, happen on Sunday in New England as well. Obviously, a ton of JD Bertrand. He's getting a lot of flack online. I understand. This is a young player too. And when you have somebody...
Made me cry again, Maria?
I'm sorry. Just get a teary box at this point. When you have somebody like Divine Deablo, remember what I said whenever he got hurt? I don't think people understand how important and how massive this loss is to this defense. Well, you saw it against the Dolphins. This guy did so much for this defense, and it's hard. Jeff Ulbricht's not lying when he says it's hard to just plug and play one player to take place of what Divine Deablo did and what he was asked to do in this defense. So, yes, I just wanted to point out that's a big one, obviously. But for me, I think it's very simple. What Atlanta's defense is very, very good at is taking away explosives from opposing offenses. That's something New England does really, really well. This is one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. So do what you're good at and try to minimize that. I'm not going to say take it away because we know that New England, they look so good right now, top to bottom as a football team. So if you can minimize those explosives, that is huge. Also, what's really interesting, when we talk about Atlanta's offense, we know that their run schemes are their bread and butter. That is what they're built off of. And when you're talking power and counter, they can do that all day. Outside zone is what this offense is built off of. Flip the script. New England, when they're running some of these power and counters of pulling some of the linemen, the Falcons defense really struggles when that is a scenario. So that's something that they've got to be very, very, very cognizant of, is New England may try to do a little bit more of that to throw Atlanta's defense off a bit. So there's a couple of things that I mentioned that I think is really important. Be very cognizant of those offensive linemen when they pull, because again, the Falcons defense has struggled with that so far, but do what you do best and take away the explosives. They're still really, really good at that. And I think that being able to minimize that is going to help them a lot on Sunday.
For me, it starts with the guys up front on defensive line. I missed the attack style defense. I ain't seen it. Where has it been? I saw shades of it in the last game, but it was late when the game was out of hand. Yeah, and Brandon Dorless, because, hey, welcome to the party, man. Missed you. Like James Pierce Jr., where you at, bro? These are the type of the games that your young guys should step up for, especially on the road. And I think that whether New England is running the football or passing the football, these young guys have to step up. D.O., I love how he's been playing. He's been pretty consistent throughout this year. And David Onyemata, for those who don't know, for my people up in Tequila. So I think that's the thing for me is getting these guys. You got your OG and D.O. playing well. Sam Roberts, I like what I've been seeing him in the run against the run. These young pups got to step up. They have to. They have to step up because this defense isn't right if these guys aren't getting off blocks, playing around the backfield, rushing the pass, stopping the run on the way to the quarterback. All of those things that we talked about in the beginning of the year, we haven't said it. So this is the game for them to step up and step up to the plate and be those guys that the Falcons drafted you to be.
Yeah. Now, did the O-line deserve the smoke from Ra, and does Raheem Morris deserve all the smoke? We'll unpack that in Next Up. This episode of our Falcons Squad show is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. So again, Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, from footwork to breathwork. Athletes sweat details, and so does Mazda. And you can feel that Japanese craftsmanship in every detail. And you can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And you're going to love the all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV. So like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. So I think you guys kind of alluded to it, but I wanted to circle back to it real quick, just in case there's anything you left on the table, Maria, before we move on to some smoke that Ra kind of gave out, and some smoke that's coming back at him. When you look at the defensive side of the ball, what's maybe one thing for you that you're saying, hey, that's missing? I know I saw it earlier in the season, and I want the defense to find it and bring it back on the road to New England.
The energy and the aggressiveness. I mean, Jarvis kind of just said it when he talks about rushing the passer, but I think John Abraham made a really good point after the game with me when we were chatting about the Dolphins, the loss to the Dolphins. He said Caden Ellis was really the only person on the defensive side of the ball that he saw with energy and efficiency all game. And I think that's really important to mention. When we rewind to the very beginning of the season against Tampa, we were like, who is this defense? They are aggressive. They're getting after the football. They are chomping at the bit to just get off. And none of that has been happening within the last few weeks. Now, they have been keeping this team in game, so I don't want to diminish that. They've been doing enough to do that. However, the aggression that we saw at the beginning of the year has really fallen off quite a bit. And you can talk about injuries. You can talk about some of these young guys that Jarvis is mentioning being in and out, especially Jalon Walker. You know, you hope you get him back at some point. But that energy that we saw and that we've seen since training camp just has not been around. So they need to bring that to New England. They're going to be juiced up there. That place is going to be really, really loud. And so I think it's important that they are kind of quieting the noise if they can with that aggression.
Yeah. And what about for you, Jarvis? What's maybe that one thing you feel like that defense lost that they've got to gain again in order to be successful against New England?
Taking the ball away. Yeah, they got to do that. They had an opportunity to do it in the last game against the Dolphins, which would have been one of those moments where you can give our offense the extra possession, because Lord, if I had to take a shot every time I heard Zac Robinson talking about how many actual offensive snaps that he had for the entire game, I'd be drunk right now. But so I think that they need to help this offense out as much as they possibly can, and that is by taking the ball away. Jesse, if you're going to be out there, I need you to be out there for us to know you're out there. Watts, where you at, bro? Need you to. That back end of that defense, they got to be able to make some plays, because we know they're capable of doing. I'm not asking them to do anything that I haven't seen on tape. So, yeah, those two guys, those two safeties, they're going to have to have one of those type games in order for this defense to have any success on the road in New England against that team coached by a guy that I have a lot of respect for, but I don't necessarily like that much.
You don't like him because he has a good football team? Is that why?
No, I mean, he's Mike Vrabel. I mean, he's not the most likable guy in the world, but I don't mind playing with those type of guys because, hey, he got a football mentality,
Yeah.
So, hey, he can make it work.
Worst thing the Titans ever did was getting rid of Mike Vrabel. One man's trash is another man's treasure.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I was like, yeah, that's not gonna last or wear very well. But hey, sometimes also you got to reset in order to have success. So the reset for Mike Vrabel is obviously New England. And speaking of that, Aaron, when you look at what New England's been able to do, there's a reason that they look so good. There's a reason that they're looked at it by some as the best team in the AFC, at least with their 6-2 record. But that doesn't mean that they're not beatable because they have lost twice. But what from this defense has been missing that you want to see the Falcons find again in order for them to hand the Patriots their third loss of the season?
I think they got to control the line of scrimmage. I think Jarvis mentioned it. It's the guys up front. Like, that's been missing. We've seen the last few weeks, the pass rush has been kind of slowed down because teams are basically like, we're going to get rid of the ball quickly because we know the strength of this pass rush is their blitzing, and that forces opposing teams to get rid of the ball quickly. And if you have a good plan for that and you're like, okay, we're going to have, as we saw in the 49ers game, Christian McCaffrey and whoever else, running these quick routes, that's going to work. And then when you combine that with the inability to stop the run, because the Falcons haven't been able to stop the run all season long. That's been a weakness of their defense the entire year. They've been able to make it work mostly in the games when the offense is scoring, and that forces the opposing team to abandon the run at a certain point, or they're too far behind where running the football doesn't help them, like in that Washington game. They're going to have to figure something out, because if you're not able to control the line of scrimmage, then, you're going to keep getting out Atlanta'd by every team that you face the rest of the year.
That will never not be a thing, by the way. That will never not be a thing.
You were waiting to drop that in, Aaron. I can tell.
Until this team can Atlanta somebody, they're just going to keep taking these strays until that.
I think.
Can I add one more delusional comment he's made this week? Can I add one more delusional comment? Just one. One.
Yeah.
So he was on 929, our former place of employment, T&I. You know what I'm saying? And he said that this is the best offense that the Falcons have had as an organization since 2016. Why is he comparing this offense to that one? A legendary offense, a historical offense. They averaged 33 points a game. The quarterback was the MVP. Why is he bringing up old stuff? We live in the moment, baby. You know what I'm saying? If Michael Penix was playing at that level, sure, you can make make the comparisons. But oh my gosh, when your offense has put up 10 points each in the last two games and is one of the worst scoring teams in the league,
at
17 points a game.
Exactly.
Touchdowns.
Say it, Maria.
Two touchdowns.
Yeah.
In 8 quarters.
Yes.
Jarvis, I'm going to give Raheem the benefit of the doubt. I think he was watching a lot of Patriots film this week, and so he was confusing.
And he got nostalgic. And
I hope he wasn't watching that film.
He was watching Patriots, and he was like, "Oh, I'm seeing a good offense, and that's the best offense."
Is that what happened?
He aspires to be. Yeah.
So Free, you're making it make sense.
Thank you for clearing that up, bro.
All right.
I think the craziest thing about the out Atlanta does is he's trying to make it positive.
Yes.
But I'm like, listen, Raw, come close, buddy.
Yeah.
It's not positive. Okay. It's real negative. We say out Atlanta as a negative connotation, buddy.
It does on so many levels, Maria, because we say things like that's so Falcony. And it's right there in line with that's so Falcony. Falcon's gonna Falcon. Oh, you Falcon today. Like, unfortunately, we know, bless his heart, what Coach was trying to do. And in his way, he's not like this is no pun intended. He's not a rah-rah person. As far as like, he doesn't get after his guys that way. He gets after his guys in a different, subtle, more like optimistic, euphemistic type of way.
I believe
but
in you.
that one kind of fell short.
Got to pick something else, because the Falcons fan base knows out Atlanta ain't a good thing. Okay,
No, like at all.
We got to pick something else here.
Yeah. Find it.
Man.
Yeah. You know how we always say that everybody had gotten exhausted with like the slogans of DQ and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
This is kind of right there in line with don't slogan us to death. Just go out there and get a dub. That's all you have to do. And all of this conversation can cease to exist if you simply go out and get a dub. But we're not done with smoke, because we know that there was some smoke and some sort of shots fired. We're going to talk about whether or not they should have been, and we're going to hold accountable the X factors next up. So, Jarvis, when you think about this week, I mean, like we said when I was going back and forth, and appreciate you, D Creative, for being so interactive with us this morning and always rocking with us. But we heard smoke that was spread just about to everybody, maybe with the exception of Caden Ellis. I think he's the only one that we all agree had a pretty nice game last week. That said, Raheem Morris did mention that, hey, he felt like the Falcons didn't necessarily play well up front, but did you think he was a little bit maybe too harsh on that O-line, or do you feel like that criticism was right where it needed to be?
I thought it was fair. I don't see any issue with him saying, hey, I'm putting my expectations, I'm raising the expectations, or I'm setting my expectations based off my offensive line. That's great, because that's how football works. That's how it operates. That's how football teams and successful teams, if you look at their offensive line and defensive line, you see success right up in there. You might see some Pro Bowlers and some All-Pro type guys. Like most of the time, successful teams have that in that particular position group. So I don't have an issue with him. It is what it is. Like, hey man, yeah, y'all need to block better. Because if your offensive coordinator is sitting here saying, hey, we weren't expecting these looks, we didn't get the look that we thought we were going to get, well, block the junk then. You know, I almost cuss. I had to stop myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. But seriously though, make sure you are, as a head coach, are laying that out. But as long as he's not getting personal, I don't have an issue with it at all.
Yeah. And what about you, Maria, when you kind of look at Rod kind of calling the O-line out a little bit there, did you think it was fair?
I think it was fair. Yeah. I mean, Jarvis is making a good point. A lot of stuff starts up front in every football game. And we've mentioned over the last 47 minutes now that the line of scrimmage is where games are won and lost a lot of the times. And this Falcons offense really has been the shining light over the last 5 years or so. And then when they start to struggle, you got to call them out. There are guys on that offensive line who should not allow certain things to happen that are happening right now. And honestly, Chris Lindstrom and Jake Matthews were fantastic in the locker room. They both said, look, the criticism is warranted. We're going to take it on the chin. We understand that there are things that we need to do better. And I think that's important. Part of, I think, that gives me so much respect for teams when they're struggling is when they're honest about things that are going wrong. And I will give Chris Lindstrom specifically a lot of credit because there are things that they're missing. There's missed assignments and not doing things that they know is happening. He even said, it's not like the Dolphins did anything crazy defensively. All of the looks we got, we knew, and we should have been able to attack against. We should have been able to be successful against. Exactly. Well, when that's happening, they're saying the execution is a problem. That was a big theme yesterday at Flowery Branch, talking about executing. We're not doing it well enough. We're not executing to the caliber in which we know we can. So I think calling out the offensive line first, and it's not just the offensive line that blocks. We all understand that too, especially some of those tight ends out there and even wide receivers in some of these cases for the Falcons. They need to execute better. And by calling out the offensive line, I think that was kind of a, hey, guys, I mean, sorry, you're going to take it on the chin a little bit, but it starts with you guys up front. So, yeah, look, I think the criticism is warranted. it's not the only place that there needs to be criticism, as I've illustrated over the last 50 minutes on this offense. I think it kind of goes everywhere, but definitely those guys have to play better. And perhaps Storm Norton could be a sign of enforcement on the way. He is going to compete. That is what they said for the job if he's healthy. So maybe that gives them some help. We'll see.
Jarvis, you look like you want to say something about Storm Norton.
Raheem, I think I've gotten a good grip on Raheem's word salad.
Word salad's a good way.
Yeah. So when it comes to talking about injuries, he said, "Oh yeah, if he's healthy, he'll come back and compete." If it wasn't up for grabs, he wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
So guess what? Guess what that means? If Storm is healthy, he's starting. So yeah, I have no issue with that. No shade to Elijah Wilkinson. I saw some guys missing some block all up and down that offensive line.
Yep.
Maybe Chris held it down like he normally does.
Sure.
But the blame, there's a lot of blame to go around. But when you have some of the things that I've seen in the last couple of games when he's faced some pretty stiff competition, it's just like, man, I want the backup in there, not the backup to the backup.
Yeah. And Aaron, for you, when you look at, and I'll give you both since Maria and Jarvis kind of spoke on it, when you look at Raheem kind of low-key calling out the O-line, but on the same token, kind of leaving that door open for Storm Norton, I mean, do you think all's fair?
Yeah, I definitely think it's fair. I think Elijah Wilkinson was solid, given the expectations, go back to 2 weeks before the season started. Everybody's panicking. Everybody's in a frenzy. Like like they're calling in the National Guard to keep people in check because everybody's like, the season's over. Caleb McGarry went down. Oh my God!
Can we have two people play that position? Has that ever happened? Let's just put two. That's what people were saying. They're like, hey, we need two people to just be there at the same time. We'll have six.
So it was a panic. And Elijah Wilkinson, give him credit. He stabilized that position for a month or so, and
bless his
now
heart.
it feels like he's kind of hit the wall, and it's okay. Let's see what Storm Norton's got at this stage, and hopefully he'll be an upgrade at that position. That's where we're at this point in time. So it's a nice little golf clap for Elijah Wilkins. You held it down. You outperformed a lot of people's expectations. So we give you your flowers, but it may be time to get you out the paint. And so I think with Raheem, and we joke about it, trying to use the name of the city as a verb to talk about being the physical team. I'm just saying, like, he's trying to claim this identity, and he's basically being like, "Hey guys, like y'all gotta help me out. Like we gotta earn this thing, and it's really on the offensive line to do that." And everybody talks about the predictability of the play calling, but like I'm watching the game and I'm like, that guy's tripping. That's why you missed that block. That's not a play calling issue. You have to hit the block. Charlie Warner, Ryan Nuzzo, like, why are you letting guys run free through the A gap and you're the starting center on a zone run? You've been in this system for now 4.5 years. How are you blowing assignments and you're the center? You're supposed to know everybody's job and you're not doing your own job. Like, that's on you. You need to be called out. As Jarvis and Maria said, like, Chris Lindstrom, you're doing fine. You had a rough game against the 49ers. You bounce back. I got no beef with you, Chris. You keep doing what you're doing. You're allowed to have a bad game or two every now and then because you bounce back. Jake, you're a longtime veteran. Again, it wasn't the greatest game you had against the 49ers, but you bounced back. You were fine. You were out there against the Dolphins. The rest of y'all need to step in.
Oh, y'all.
That's the issue. And as Maria said, Charlie Warner, you're including that because so much of this offense is reliant on basically having 6 offensive linemen and you're being factored as an offensive lineman. And, we've had great games from Charlie Warner. The Minnesota game immediately comes to mind. And we've had some very bad games, Tampa Bay last week. And so like this roller coaster, the Warner coaster, let's get off this thing. Let's get this smooth ride like we had last year. And I think that will do wonders for this team. And so I get why Raheem is calling out people because they need this unit to play better. And it's as simple as that.
Maria, I know we got you for another 60 to 90 seconds. So let me give you the chance to show us, or tell us rather, who has the potential to have the biggest impact just in terms of players who might return this week, one on offense, one on defense for you.
I need Drake London to come back. I need him to come back with a vengeance. I need him to be healthy. I need him to give this offense exactly what it's missing. So I'm looking at Drake London. Hopefully he plays. He feels like he's going to play. I'm not going to say he will, but I am obviously very hopeful for him to come back on Sunday. I'm going to look at Jalon Walker because I have had so many frustrations with Jalon because he's healthy, he's not healthy, and he's equally as frustrated as I think I am because this is a guy that wants to be out there, but you draft him to make an impact, and when health is a concern, obviously no impact can be made. So I'm looking at Jalon on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm looking at Drake on the offensive side of the ball.
Thank you, Maria. Appreciate you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. We'll see you next week. So Jarvis, Aaron, Maria made some great points just in terms of her impact players. And we've talked about that as well. Like, we need these players to come back. We got the injury report yesterday on the DMP side, Leonard Floyd, Casey Washington, Zach Harrison, and then limited participation, Darnell Mooney, Jesse Bates, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Michael Penix Jr., Jalon Walker, and then Storm Norton back to full participation to your earlier point, Jarvis. So for you, offensive side of the ball, who needs to come back and make that big impact defensive side of the ball?
I need 9 to be back in there, back in the saddle. I got to have him because, like based off of what I saw last week, I know it's not all on Kirk. Y'all calm down. But I want to see the future, who I feel could be the future of this organization and under center. Like, I gotta have Michael Penix in there because I feel like he's a guy that can make the throws, that can get the ball where it needs to be in order to take advantage of teams that are starting to play that man coverage. They're starting to lock down. He can make those throws. We've seen him do it. I'm not just praying for it. I've seen it, so I believe that he can do that. So yeah, on the offensive side of football, it has to be Michael Penix Jr. I wanted to see him back in there. And for me, I'm just like Maria when it comes to Jalon Walker. And I think that Jalon Walker can help soothe the loss of Divine Deablo because he can play that off-ball linebacker, and he has done some of it. I like how he looks, obviously, because he did it at Georgia. That he's comfortable in that particular spot. So I feel like him being deployed as a multi-use weapon, so like Divine Deablo was, not saying he's on that level, but I feel like the way he plays against the run and the way you can use him as a spy, because Drake may like to take off and run the football. I love 11 against Drake May. Trust me, I like that matchup. I think the Falcons can win that matchup if he were to be put in that position. So yeah, for me, on defense, has to be Jalon Walker.
Yeah, and for you, Free, who do you need to see come back and make that impact on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball?
Well, I'm gonna make it a clean sweep with Jalon Walker for a lot of the reasons that Jarvis said. On the defensive side of the ball, I do think, as we talked about earlier, with needing to have that spy and not necessarily wanting to put Caden Ellis in that role, and certainly not wanting to put J.D. Bertrand in that role. I think Jalon Walker is your best option at this point in time, and it allows you to be a little bit more creative with some of those blitzes and simulated pressures where you can drop him in the coverage and maybe, so that you can avoid J.D. Bertrand being in coverage. You can send him on some of those rushes and still allow Caden Ellis to rush the quarterback as opposed to having to have him drop into coverage and all those various things. So I think the presence of Jalon Walker does unlock a lot of things from a pass rush standpoint, even if it isn't just simply him going out there and winning. And as Jarvis said, the run game stuff, I think will also get a boost there because they were not great setting the edge against the Dolphins last week. You knew the Dolphins wanted to get outside, and the Dolphins were able to get outside with their run game. And, we need better from that edge group. Offensively, again, I think Jarvis is right with Michael Penix. I'm looking forward most to him. You can really pick any of these offensive players, but Drake or Michael Penix, but it's just kind of similar to what we saw last year where we were like, oh yeah, Kirk, I think the Kirk thing's run its course. We need that shot of adrenaline in the offense. And even though Michael Penix has not been great on the road, I think you're kind of hoping for a similar shot of adrenaline, and he can basically say, oh yeah, that week off made me feel like, okay, we have that sense of urgency and kind of go out there and play fast and loose like we saw him last year. That's one of the things we've talked about, where it's like you didn't have the sort of hesitation from Michael Penix in those last 3 games last year, in part due to feeling like the team's back was against the wall. He was a young, sort of unproven player, and it felt like he kind of came in there and being like, okay, I'm going to show you what I'm all about, and we're going to go out there guns blazing and attacking down the field. And I'm hoping that we're kind of at that same stage, in this. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be in a situation where your back is against the wall at this stage in the season, but the Falcons kind of need to play with a similar sort of sense of urgency. And hopefully Michael Penix is chomping at the bit to get back into this lineup and sort of unleash those dragons down the field in this offense. And maybe that will help spark this offense to perform to the level that we've all been expecting it to this season and haven't consistently gotten.
Free with the phrases. I got one more. Unleash the dragon. So I'm definitely gonna use that one because I like that one. And I agree with you guys, by the way. No one to add on the offensive side of the ball, but definitely defensively would love to see Billy Bowman Jr. come back and make an impact, because yes, we've seen some solid play from D. Alford. Not saying that it's not been good play, but we saw what Billy Bowman Jr. was able to do to start the season. He was impactful. So it'd be great if Jeff Ulbrich would have the opportunity to have one more holster sort of in the gun for that defense, because they're going to need that secondary to really perform this week as well. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Falcons Squad show your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked on Falcons with your host, Aaron Freeman, as your second listen. Check out Maria Martin, host of Sports Extra on Sundays on 11 Alive. And you can catch Jarvis as a frequent contributor for Locked on Falcons and Sports Extra. We'll see you next time.